Now again, I personally don't believe that Melchizedek was Shem or Eber, but I do believe that Melchizedek was a Semitic king that ruled over Salem. Salem being Jerusalem, a Semitic kingdom in the Levant that was worshiping the god of Shem. Because of this, I believe it's important to note that the priesthood and the knowledge of the god of Shem is in the Levant. It's in the land of Israel. We don't find the priesthood of God Most High, El Elyon, in Armenia or Anatolia or Iran or even Mesopotamia. We only hear about Melchizedek, the king of Salem, Jerusalem, the priest of God Most High, El Elyon, in the Levant. Furthermore, we know that Jerusalem is a Semitic kingdom built in the late Copper and early Bronze Age. Semites were in the Levant during this time, and this actually proves that Semites were in the Levant even before Abraham arrived. Abraham was not the first Semite in the Levant. Furthermore, why is the priesthood and the knowledge of the god of Shem in the Levant? Perhaps it's because Shem was the first to settle the Levant, and therefore that knowledge and the priesthood is in the Levant. This actually perfectly fits with archaeology, since we know that Semites expand from the Levant. Their homeland and origins is in the Levant because Semites descend from the Natufians, who are also an ancient Levantine population, who would represent the best population as the early descendants of Shem. Everything is starting to come together now. As a matter of fact, tradition even states that Shem settled the Levant after the flood. This is why the story of Abraham is very interesting, because there are a few Semites in the land when he arrives. But that's because, according to tradition, the land of Shem was stolen by the Canaanites. So in a sense, Abraham is reclaiming stolen land, which belonged to Shem first. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the Israelites, and more importantly, the Most High, are not thieves. They aren't stealing the land from the Canaanites. It's actually the Canaanites who stole the land first from Shem. From the University of California Press, titled Conception of the Conquest of the Land During the Second Temple Period, and it reads, according to the book of Jubilees, chapter 8, Shem, the son of Noah, inherited the entire idle land of Israel, from the Euphrates to the Red Sea. Later, the Canaanites took the land by force, and were therefore cursed. Jubilees chapter 10, verse 29 through 34. The book of Jubilees thus deviates from what appears in the list of nations in Genesis chapter 10, in which the land of Canaan was allotted to Ham's son Canaan. Genesis chapter 10, verse 15 through 19. The claim that the land of Canaan had actually been a part of Shem's inheritance that was then stolen by the Canaanites also appears in rabbinic sources. We read, for example, in the Mishnah on Genesis chapter 12, verse 6, the Canaanites were then in the land, for the land of Israel was cast in the lot of Shem, as it is written, and Melchizedek, the king of Shalem. In this, the rabbis provide a justification for the expulsion of the Canaanites. Canaan stole Shem's promised land. Shem was blessed and given the inheritance, but the Canaanites and the Hamites continued to try to take over his inheritance. Shem's descendants moved away to avoid the conflict, leaving Shem mostly on his own, but still the king of Salem. Shem's inheritance, the land promised to him, is taken by the Canaanites and became known as the land of Canaan. The land of Canaan is really Shem's rightful inheritance, stolen by Canaan and his family. Abraham is called back to this land by God to retrieve it for God's chosen people. The promised land was controlled by the Canaanites because they had usurped it from Shem's family. Abraham asserted his familial claim and so was made the family's new head. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the Israelites, and most importantly the Most High, are not stealing the land from the 7 nations of Canaan. In reality, they are reclaiming the ancestral Semitic homeland, the land of Shem. This is why we find the priesthood, God Most High, El Elyon, the God of Shem, Salem, Jerusalem, kingship, early Semitic language, early Semitic customs, the first agriculturalist, the first pastoralist, all within the land of the Levant. The only ancient people that best represents the ancestors of Semites, the Natufians, are all in the Levant, the Promised Land. And I believe that there's very interesting symbolism behind this. The ancestors of Semites, Natufians, then Proto-Semites themselves, and the Promised Land. It's all within the Levant region. It all overlaps each other. It all parallels with one another. Shem settled the Levant first, before the Canaanites. This is why we find the Natufians there and the Proto-Semites there who come from the Natufians, and then the Promised Land itself. And then Abraham is called to return back to the Promised Land and take it back from the Canaanites, because the Canaanites stole the ancestral homeland, the origin of Semites. In reality, the story of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and the Israelites is a redemption arc. They are coming back to reclaim their land, the land of their ancestors. This one Semitic family from the lineage of Shem was chosen to do this act. In terms of DNA, this is also why haplogroup E is the best option for Shem, since Natufians and Proto-Semites carry haplogroup E. From the book In Hot Pursuit of Language and Prehistory, it reads, "This paper makes an additional inference, since there is archaeological and physical anthropological reason to believe that the Natufians were related to modern Semitic-speaking peoples of the Levant." And according to the paper titled Paleolithic DNA from the Caucasus Reveals Core of West Eurasian Ancestry, it reads, "Such a scenario would also explain the presence of Y chromosome haplogroup E in the Natufians and Levantine farmers, a common link between the Levant and Africa." And according to the paper titled Bayesian Phylogenetic Analysis of Semitic Languages identifies an early Bronze Age origin of Semitic in the Near East, and it reads, "We estimate that Semitic had an early Bronze Age origin, approximately 5750 YBP, in the Levant, followed by an expansion of Akkadian into Mesopotamia." And according to EUpedia titled Haplogroup E1B1B, it reads, E-M34 is the main Middle Eastern variety of E1B1B and is thought to have arrived with the Proto-Semitic people in the late Copper to early Bronze Age. As we can clearly see, haplogroup E is the best choice for Shem because Natufians, who are the ancestors of Semites, had haplogroup E, and then Proto-Semites themselves also carried haplogroup E. You go all the way back, that leads back to Shem. Furthermore, Natufians and Proto-Semites both have their origins within the Levant, the same area that Shem would have settled after the flood, before the Canaanites came and stole the land. And lastly, there's a very interesting parallel by the fact that Natufians, the ancestors of Semites, and that Proto-Semites, and that the Promised Land are all within the Levant, and that they all overlap each other perfectly, which I don't find to be a coincidence. This perhaps is symbolic because we know that Abraham will be called to the Levant to take the land from the Canaanites, likely because, in a symbolic way, this land was once the home of Shem, and that these Canaanites stole the land, and Abraham, a descendant of Shem, is chosen to go to the land and get rid of the Canaanites who are living there. And with that, I say, be blessed and shalom.